The cardboard box felt heavier than it should as I walked past the elevators toward the basement stairs. Someone behind me started clapping. Slow, mocking applause that echoed through the hallway. A phone camera flash caught the corner of my eye. Derek from accounting was filming, grinning like he'd just witnessed the funniest moment of his career. The basement door opened with a metal groan. Inside, the air smelled like forgotten paperwork and industrial carpet from another decade. My new desk sat under a fluorescent light that flickered every few seconds. The door locked behind me with a click that felt permanent. I set the box down and stared at the concrete walls. They hadn't just moved my workspace. They'd moved my entire existence at this company somewhere. People wouldn't have to see it anymore. 3 weeks earlier, I almost walked out during a Tuesday morning meeting. Not because I hated my job, because I was too good at noticing problems everyone else wanted to ignore. Bailey, our operations director, was presenting quarterly numbers that didn't match the invoices I'd processed the week before. The revenue projections looked impressive on her slides, but the vendor payments told a different story. I raised my hand during the Q&A session. Bailey's smile froze when I asked about the discrepancy. The room went quiet. Everyone stared at their laptops. After the meeting, my manager pulled me aside. She asked if I could help fix things quietly instead of asking questions publicly. I said yes. I should have said no. The HR meeting happened on a Thursday afternoon. My manager sat beside me, smiling that tight smile people use when they're nervous. The HR representative, a woman named Claire, explained my temporary relocation to the lower level. She emphasized temporary 3 times in 2 minutes. Her voice shook slightly on the 3rd repetition. That's when I understood this wasn't temporary at all. This was permanent, disguised as provisional. Claire slid a document across the table. New workspace assignment, effective immediately. She asked me to sign before explaining what I was signing. I read it anyway. The language was vague, filled with phrases like operational efficiency and resource optimization. Translation: we're moving you somewhere, you can't cause problems. I signed because I needed this job. My daughter's college tuition wasn't going to pay itself. The laughter followed me down the stairwell like smoke. It lasted longer than laughter should, bouncing off concrete walls and metal railings. I counted the people I passed, 15 colleagues who'd eaten lunch with me last week. Not one of them said anything. Not one defended me or asked what was happening. Their silence felt worse than the laughter. When I reached the basement, I opened my laptop and checked my email. My inbox was completely empty. Not just new messages. Everything. Years of correspondence, project files, meeting notes, all gone. I refreshed 3 times. Still nothing. Someone had systematically removed me from every distribution list, every project folder, every conversation that mattered. I'd been erased while still employed. The first week in the basement passed in absolute silence. No morning check-ins, no project updates, no casual questions about weekend plans, just the flickering fluorescent light and the sound of old pipes groaning behind the walls. My calendar stayed empty. Meeting invitations that used to fill my schedule stopped arriving. I watched the company's internal messaging system, seeing conversations happen around me like I'd become invisible. On Wednesday, my phone buzzed with a text from Hannah, someone I'd trained 2 years ago. The message was short: "I'm sorry." I didn't know what to say. I stared at those words for 10 minutes. She didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. That's how it works when someone falls out of favor. Before the basement, I was the person people came to when something felt wrong. Payroll errors that didn't add up, vendor invoices that duplicated mysteriously, approval processes that skipped necessary signatures. I fixed things quietly, documenting everything in case questions came later. That was my mistake. The documentation. People don't like having their mistakes recorded, even when you're helping fix them. I thought I was being thorough. They thought I was building files. Those same problems were still happening now. I could tell from the stressed voices I heard through the basement ceiling during video calls. But now nobody was catching them. Nobody was asking uncomfortable questions. The errors were just piling up somewhere, growing bigger every day. 2 weeks into the basement, I heard shouting through the ceiling during a video call. Raised voices, angry enough that words carried through concrete and insulation. Someone stormed out. Footsteps pounded past the basement door. This never happened before. Our company prided itself on professional communication, even during disagreements. Something was breaking down upstairs. Later that afternoon, I received an email by accident. Someone had replied all instead of forwarding privately. The message chain showed Bailey and two vice presidents arguing about missed deadlines and vendor complaints. The anger in their words felt raw, unfiltered. They were blaming each other for problems I used to prevent. I wasn't copied intentionally. They'd forgotten I still existed on some automated lists. I could have replied to that email chain, could have pointed out the solution they were missing, could have reminded them I was still here, still capable of helping. Instead, I let the message sit in my inbox. I didn't delete it. I didn't respond. I just watched as the chain grew longer throughout the day. More people joined the argument. The tone got uglier. Accusations replaced questions. Someone mentioned talking to the board. Someone else said that was overreacting. By evening, 37 emails had accumulated in that thread. Every single one showed a company spiraling into dysfunction, and I had documentation of all of it, delivered straight to my inbox by their own carelessness. Sometimes the best action is patient silence. I started keeping notes during the third week. Not evidence, exactly. Just patterns. Times when I heard urgent conversations through the ceiling. Dates when vendor emails bounced back with payment issues. Moments when the stress upstairs became audible even in my isolated basement. I used a simple notebook, the kind that doesn't sync to any cloud service. Pen and paper felt safer somehow. The patterns became clear quickly. The same name kept appearing in every problem. Bailey. She was involved in the missed payments. She'd approved the questionable vendor contracts. She'd pushed through the revenue projections that didn't match reality. I wasn't building a case against her. I was just watching the truth arrange itself into an undeniable shape. Leadership started blaming communication gaps during the fourth week. I heard it through the grapevine, through the few people who still texted me occasionally. They'd point at my empty chair upstairs during meetings, suggest that information wasn't flowing properly anymore, imply that operational efficiency had suffered since the restructuring. Which was true. It had suffered, but they couldn't say why without admitting they'd isolated the person who made things flow smoothly. My manager sent an email asking if I'd help out informally. Just look at some invoices, she wrote. Give feedback on vendor contracts. Nothing official. I read that email 5 times, feeling anger burn in my chest. They wanted my expertise without acknowledging my existence. They wanted me to work without credit. I responded to my manager's request the next morning, said I'd be happy to help through official channels. Could she add me back to the relevant project groups? Restore my calendar permissions? Include me in the appropriate meetings? She replied within an hour. That's not how this works right now. Maybe in a few weeks when things stabilize. I wrote back immediately. Then I can't help informally. My expertise is available through proper channels or not at all. She didn't respond after that. The silence felt like victory and isolation mixed together. I'd drawn a boundary, stood up for myself, and in doing so I'd guaranteed my continued exile. But at least I wasn't letting them use me while pretending I didn't exist. Sometimes dignity costs more than cooperation. The board email arrived on a Monday morning, sent company-wide. Our chairman, a man named Nelson who usually stayed invisible, was requesting a brief operational health update from department heads. Nothing formal, just a paragraph or two about current projects, challenges, and resource allocation. The email was polite, almost casual, but something about its timing felt significant. Board members don't randomly ask for updates unless they've heard concerning whispers. Leadership responded immediately with a company-wide message. All operational updates should be coordinated through Bailey before submission to the board. Do not respond individually. The instruction was clear. They were controlling the narrative, making sure the board only saw the version of reality they wanted to present. My manager sent me a separate message. This doesn't apply to you. I spent Monday evening thinking about that board email. About Nelson's simple request for honesty. About Bailey's instruction to filter everything through her office first. About my manager's assumption that I wouldn't respond anyway. I opened a new message Tuesday morning, kept it short, factual, completely professional. described my role in operations before the relocation, noted the types of problems I used to catch and resolve, mentioned the gaps I'd observed since my workspace change. No accusations, no drama. Just the boring truth about how things worked versus how they work now. I copied only one person, Nelson. Not the entire board, not company leadership, just the chairman who'd asked an honest question. I hit send before I could reconsider. The email left my outbox at 8:47 Tuesday morning. The first sign something had changed came Wednesday afternoon. Bailey's assistant canceled 3 major vendor meetings without explanation. By Thursday morning, the operations budget review had been postponed indefinitely. Normal payment approvals started stalling. People whispered in hallways instead of conference rooms. Someone on the finance team told Hannah they'd been asked to pause all non-essential transfers pending leadership review. Hannah texted me, "What's happening? Everything's frozen." I didn't respond because I didn't actually know, not yet. But I suspected my email had reached someone who asked better questions than I could. Someone with the authority to stop the machine until they understood why it was making strange noises. The board worked slowly but thoroughly, and once they started digging, they didn't stop until they reached the truth. Friday morning brought barely controlled chaos. Executives clustered in hallways, voices low and urgent. The confident swagger that usually characterized leadership had evaporated into nervous energy. People who'd ignored me for weeks suddenly remembered I existed. My manager appeared at the basement door, looking exhausted. Coffee stains marked her usually pristine blazer. She asked if I had a minute to talk. I said sure. She sat on the corner of my desk, an intimacy that felt desperate. The board had questions about operational procedures. Bailey was in meetings all day. They needed someone who understood the details. Would I be willing to help clarify some things? I asked if this was official or informal. She hesitated. Official. Finally, I said I'd be available whenever they needed me. She left looking relieved and worried simultaneously. The coffee meeting happened Friday afternoon. Derek, the same VP who'd filmed my walk to the basement, asked me to grab coffee. His tone was casual, friendly, like the past month hadn't happened. We sat in the break room upstairs, my first time back since the relocation. He stirred sugar into his cup for 30 seconds longer than necessary. Then he said my move was misunderstood. People took it wrong. There was no malice intended, just logistical necessity. I watched him avoid eye contact while speaking. Asked him why filming it was necessary for logistics, why the laughter felt logistical, why humiliation served operational efficiency. He looked away, focusing on his coffee like it held answers. We sat in uncomfortable silence for 2 minutes. Then he said he should get back to work. I stayed and finished my coffee slowly. The board interviews started the following Monday. They called people one by one throughout the week. Administrative staff, department heads, project managers, even junior analysts, everyone who'd witnessed my relocation or worked with me before. The interviews happened behind closed doors in the executive conference room. People emerged looking thoughtful, sometimes troubled. Stories apparently weren't matching. Hannah told me her interview lasted 90 minutes. They asked about specific projects, decision-making processes, who provided oversight on vendor contracts. She said they seemed most interested in understanding how information flowed before my move versus after. They asked if she'd noticed any operational changes. She told them the truth. Everything felt shakier now, less organized, more prone to falling through cracks. On Thursday afternoon, they called me. I was their last interview. I sat across from 3 board members in the executive conference room. Nelson, the chairman, plus 2 others whose names I didn't catch. They asked me to describe my role before the relocation. I explained the vendor oversight, the invoice verification, the approval process monitoring. Described it in the boring, technical terms that characterized the actual work. No drama, no emotional appeals, just how things functioned. They asked what changed after my move. I explained the isolation, the removed access, the gaps I'd observed from a distance. Still no accusations, just facts arranged chronologically. Nelson asked one final question. In your professional opinion, why were you moved? I said I didn't know for certain. But I'd noticed that people who asked uncomfortable questions often became uncomfortable people to have around. Nelson sighed, writing something in his notebook that I couldn't see. The board's preliminary findings arrived Wednesday morning via confidential memo. I wasn't supposed to see it, but Hannah's desk was near the printer, and she photographed it before anyone noticed. The memo didn't mention financial losses specifically. Instead, it focused on internal trust breakdown. The phrase erosion of operational integrity appeared 6 times. The board had discovered something worse than embezzlement or fraud. They'd found a culture where truth became inconvenient, and inconvenient people disappeared. Where documentation was seen as disloyalty instead of diligence. Where asking questions earned punishment rather than answers. The memo concluded that the company's operational foundation had become unstable, not because of external market forces, but because of internal silencing mechanisms. Someone in leadership said this is bigger than we thought. They'd meant Bailey's oversight failures, but the board had found something larger. Systemic dysfunction. Bailey announced her leave of absence on Thursday afternoon. The company-wide email used phrases like personal time and family obligations. Everyone understood what it really meant. People thought the crisis was over. Conversations in hallways shifted from whispered anxiety to relieved speculation about new leadership. But the operational accounts stayed frozen. Vendor payments remained pending. Budget approvals continued stalling. Friday morning brought confusion. If Bailey was gone, why wasn't everything returning to normal? My manager asked if I knew anything. I said I didn't, which was mostly true. I suspected the board was waiting for something, but I didn't know what. Hannah texted, "Why are the accounts still locked?" I replied honestly, because fixing the symptom doesn't cure the disease. They'd removed one person, but the culture that enabled her remained untouched. The critical board meeting happened the following Monday. Nelson and the other board members spent 6 hours interviewing the remaining executives. The question they kept asking, according to people who overheard fragments through conference room walls, was devastatingly simple. Why was she moved to the basement? The answers varied wildly. Some executives claimed operational efficiency. Others suggested personality conflicts. A few admitted they didn't actually know. They just followed Bailey's directive without questioning it. The inconsistency told the board everything they needed to know. Nobody could articulate a legitimate business reason for my relocation, because no legitimate business reason existed. I'd been moved for asking questions, for documenting problems, for making people uncomfortable by being competent, and every executive who'd gone along with it had revealed their willingness to prioritize politics over functionality. HR began revising records on Tuesday. My employment file was updated with corrected dates, restored job description, and formal acknowledgement of what they called an inappropriate workplace action. Titles changed quietly throughout the organization. Bailey's director position was eliminated entirely, absorbed into other departments with better oversight. My manager received a written warning for participating in what the board termed retaliatory relocation. The changes happened without announcement or celebration. The company was trying to fix its foundation without admitting how badly it had cracked. Wednesday afternoon, Derek appeared at the basement door. He asked if we could speak privately. I said this was private enough. He stood awkwardly in the doorway, shifting his weight between feet. The confidence that had characterized him during my walk down here had completely evaporated. Derek said he didn't mean for things to go this far. The filming, the laughter, the casual cruelty, he'd thought it was harmless office humor. Hadn't considered how it would feel from my perspective. He was sorry. Genuinely sorry. I let him finish his entire apology before responding. Then I asked a question. How far did you think humiliation should go? He opened his mouth but no words came out. I continued, you filmed someone's professional exile like it was entertainment. At what point did you imagine that would feel okay? He stared at his shoes, unable or unwilling to meet my eyes. After a long silence, he said he had no answer. I told him that was the truest thing he'd said since arriving. He left without another word. Some apologies arrived too late to matter, offered only because consequences forced their delivery. The board's final decision came Thursday morning via company-wide announcement. All operational accounts would remain frozen until new leadership and oversight procedures were implemented. They called it stabilization, a necessary pause to prevent further trust erosion. The announcement detailed new reporting structures, mandatory documentation protocols, and anonymous channels for raising concerns without retaliation. My role was officially restored, workspace relocated back upstairs to a better office than I'd had before. They offered a formal apology for what they termed an unjustified adverse action. The salary adjustment felt less like compensation and more like acknowledgement that silence carries a price. But I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired. Tired of fighting for basic respect. Tired of proving my value to people who should have recognized it automatically. The board had fixed the immediate problems, but they couldn't fix the memory of walking past 15 colleagues who said nothing. I submitted my resignation Friday afternoon. 2 weeks' notice, professional and brief. My manager looked genuinely shocked when I handed her the letter. Asked if this was about the salary, because they could negotiate further. I told her it wasn't about money. She asked what would make me stay. I said nothing, because some workplaces break trust so thoroughly that no repair can restore it. The board had vindicated me, restored my position, acknowledged the injustice, but vindication doesn't erase the sound of laughter following you down basement stairs. Doesn't unhear colleagues' silence when you needed one voice to speak up. On my last day, they held a goodbye lunch. People said nice things about my contributions. Someone mentioned how much I'd be missed. I smiled and thanked them and left with my reputation intact and my head high. The basement got renovated the next month, turned into collaborative workspace with better lighting. They laughed when I was moved down there, filmed it like comedy. They stopped laughing when the board froze every account and everything stopped working without me. Sometimes the best revenge is just being right and having the patience to let other people discover that truth themselves.